The next topic is functions, and this is is also an important topic because Python is considered as one of the languages which people tend to use functional programming a lot. So although it's not a pure functional programming language, there are a lot of libraries which make the Python program also a functional programming language. So that means you can use those of libraries packages and tend to emulate Python as a kind of like functional programming. So that means you don't have any object-oriented programming, that and also you mostly write procedure-oriented programming, and you don't so basically a functional definition of functional programming is that you don't have any a feedback on so you basically have return types, return data, and you don't alter any of the execution part. So you have this, you don't have side effects basically with the functional programming. So although we don't talk about functional programming now, we will be talking how to write a procedural oriented programming using a lot of functions in Python. Okay, so basic syntax of Python is writing a function name. It's just with the diff syntax, and we'll specify all the arguments here, and with the return types, and it's pretty simple as any other programming language. So let's clear all this whole section. Yeah, so if it doesn't have any return type, it's basically if it doesn't have any return statement, it returns a none by default Python. So let's say this is a print statement, it would print out, and you can write one function such way that these two print statement could be a part of this function, and all you need to do is you need to call this one function and both of the statements would be executed. This is how you design a functional program. This is how you think in a procedural oriented manner. So that means you tend to combine a lot of statements which makes a useful a function, and that could be invoked pretty easily, and that makes it pretty readable to a user. That's the whole definition of making a function and making the program functional, and using a lot of methods in the program. Yeah, so and you could basically add a lot of features to that function by not making the print statement static, and you can pass some arguments and think creatively. This also tends to make the execution of the program or the program ability a little more creative. Yeah, so this is how it works. And let's say, yeah, so we have this name, and we pass this name to that function. You'd get the output as this. Since we are using a comma operator here, you'd get the output as a tuple. If you want let's say a string output, you just specify this and you get a string output. You just have to remove the comma over there. Okay, so we are talking about the return statements. So return statements are nothing but whatever results it has generated, the function wants to return it to the user. So we ideally type keyboard called return and return any variable. So Python cannot return multiple, any language cannot have multiple returns, so it will be having any single return. So although it has a single return, you can return a tuple. So basically, so let's talk about tuple in a bit. Yeah, so this how this works is it basically calculates multiplies it, calculates it times x times y, and then returns the value. So we wrote the function and we'll get the result. Basically 5 into 4 into 5, this function performs that operations and gives you back the result. Yeah, so and also you can write a doc statement for the any functions. So when you have a doc statement, there are a lot of other advantages also. One of the easiest advantage to see is that Python has a help. When you specify help with the and pass a function to that, it would give the doc string out, and you would be able to easily read the module definitions, module doc string. So there are a lot of other advantages of writing and also we will you can check out the style guides of Python to look into the doc types. Okay, let's take one more example. Okay, this example is particularly to what we are talking about, the multiple returns. You can have a tuple return, so that means you'll be having a set of elements returned to the user. So let's consider one list, and so what we are going to do is we'll be passing that list to this particular function, egg function, and when you pass that list to the function, it performs highest, lowest, and first and last operation, and return whatever is highest and lowest and first and the last. So one drawback of the return multiple returns is that the user has to know what is written in what order, so that you can catch exactly what you wanted to catch. So that's the reason we write doc strings in the method, so that we get to know what is the order of the return, so that user can use that return properly. And yeah, so one more other thing about the function is that unlike other most of the other compiler based languages, there is something called as default arguments. So once you specify the default arguments, it becomes that it's not necessary to pass that particular variable to the value to the function itself. So if we have this particular method called implicit add, and there are three variables, three arguments, x, y, and z, and y and z as default arguments. Whenever the user wants to call this function, he doesn't have to specify two other variables. It's not mandatory, so it will take the default arguments values and then try to perform operations. So whenever you have a default operation like assign already, which is declared, so for user it becomes as an option. So when we run this now, so this would return 430. So, and also you can pass your own value, and when you pass your own value, this will take the new value and compute it. So and there are other examples. Yeah, so this is the same whatever we the function we have, the other outputs of the applicator, and these will be the output of this. And this is pretty simple and straightforward implementation of default arguments. Okay, as the two other things to consider with the arguments is that there are two things: any number of arguments. So any number of arguments could be given in two styles. One is so any number of arguments in the sense, so here we had the default arguments, although the user or the one who wrote this method has to know how many number of arguments it has and it needs. But sometimes the user might be passing a lot more variables that the person who wrote the code would not know what and all argument or how much value he's going to send. Is he going to send a list, or is he going to send a lot of values to the add operation? Or you can write a generic add operation like add n, and you don't know how many it is you're going to get. So in that case, what you can do is if you are aware that you need at least one argument, you specify it first, and then rest of them you specify it as a star args. Star args, what it does is it basically takes all the list arguments. So if you specify more than one value or in one value, it converts the args as a list. So basically args will become as a list. So if you want, also you can check the type of this arg over here. Args. So when we run this, okay, so you see that it's either a list or a tuple. So now it will be a tuple, so args would be a tuple here. So since this would be immutable, so it's ideally a tuple. Okay, so when we have this args, how we pass is we basically iterate through these args. So this is a list comprehension, we convert that to list, and then we can use those whatever arguments we have specified. So you can basically pass n number of argument to this, and this would still work. Yeah, this would still work. And the minimum what you can give is minimum we can give up to 1, and this would work. So if you get less than that, it would give a throw error, because since first needs to be there. So you can tweak the same code by removing the first here, and yeah. And now if you pass the 0 value, it would work. The total value would be 0 here if you do not pass the first variable. Okay, so this is the same thing. You are passing add n and 6.5. So 6.5 is only single digit. It worked, single value. Okay, so other thing is a named value, or they call it as named arguments. Sorry, named arguments. So that means you specify it as a double star. And so one thing about the function is when you pass it as a value or a set of values, you can basically say this first equal to 1, and so that this is one of the problem, is that you have to specify, sorry, we'll remove this. So if you specify keyword for one of them, and you have to specify the keyword for the rest all of them. So that means, well, now we wanted to run. Sorry. Let's run this again. Yep. Yeah, so this would work, I guess. This would not work, because the keyword argument should be at the end always. Non-keyword argument, keyword argument should always at the end. So we run this would work. So the same concept we could also so people always tend to write in a key value pair. So if people write in a key value pair and not in a valued pair, so it would be difficult with this args, because this is a tuple. So in that case, there is one more arg, so you can specify the star names, star quarks we call. So there, this becomes a dictionary, names becomes a dictionary, and it will have a key value pair where key is whatever argument name and the value is the value they specify. So in this case, so if you want to check out the names.items, you will get all the key value pair as x and 3 star 4 animals and mouse, and z is a key. And so let's run this. Yeah, so since we have joined using space, and then what we have done is we have used the name, that's key, and the value of str. So basically we have taken name value, so that would be x12. We have taken all the name and value from the names, so that's basically, it's a dictionary. Okay. So this is about it. So this is pretty handy in the case you don't know the items that they are going to pass. So at that case, you can basically use a dictionary and find out what are the keyed argument that they have passed. Yeah. So the next thing is the global and local variables. So this is also important concept in when you dealing with the functions, because there will be always a global and so this is called as a scope in functions. So let's see this example. So in this there are two functions, one inside one. It's a nested function. So you have this function, and when you have this function and there is a x equal to 2 inside this function, the scope will be local only for this function, and this x value would not go outside. The x value for this would be this function would be 1, and x value for this function will be 2. So when this execution stops and when it comes out of this, the print, if you print out outside x, it would always print this, not that. This is only local for this particular function. Whenever the execution ends, this ends. Okay, so let's print on that. Yeah, you just see inside third function is equal to, this is 2, but inside outside x it's 1. And the similar thing, when you use a global keyword, what happens is the same thing, but again it will give the same output. For inside third function it would be 2, and outside would be again 1, but there would be one more globally defined variable that you can access from anywhere, that would be created by using the global instance, and that would be assigned value 2. Yeah. Okay, so the final kind of, it's an important and most you know, people tend to use this lambda functions if you want to write Python, functional, use Python as a functional language. As I told, there are a lot of libraries and packages and modules which supports functional programming, and Lambda is one of them. So Lambda is, you can think of it as an inline function. It helps to achieve the inline function capability just by, it has a return value and it has a set of expression that it performs. For example, take this, so it has a keyword, so lambda, so consider this as a function. So what you're going to do is, you are going to pass x value to it. This becomes a function now. You're passing a value argument x, and then you perform an expression and return x to the set. That's what happens. So when you run this, you would pass 8, so this has become a lambda function, and you pass 8 to it, and this performs the expression and returns it also. So this is how lambda function works. So let's take this example. This is a little complicated example. So what happens here is, so there are two functions, one is double and one is square. Both of them take a single argument. This performs it basically multiplies by 2, and this squares it. And there is one more function. What we are trying to do is, we are trying to compose one more function out of it, such that it performs a function of function. So that means it does a function, so it takes two arguments, that's f and g. So you can give double and square. If you give double and square, what it does is, we are going to do so the expression here is f of g of x. So we'll be passing one x variable, one particular argument to the final function, which would be given by the lambda. So that would be used by this particular expression. So it does the g of x. First it calls this function and returns it, and whatever you value get in that, it will be passed to the f function. So if the f function here is double, so it would first perform the square and then it would perform the double, and this expression composes a function which makes sure that this it happens in this sequence, and this would be returned now. So if you directly call this function with these two arguments, what it does is, it composes a new function and returns that function to this double square. Now you can directly call this double square with an argument which would perform function of function, and so what basically does is, it does first perform a square, 3 square, and then that's 9, then it does a double, that's 18. So when you run this, yeah, you would get an 18 as output. Yeah, this is how you form a complex, and lambda functions are not that readable, but it does have a capability of functional programming. That means it doesn't have any side effect here. So see, it just returns a value. It did not affect any other variables over here. Yeah. This is all about the functional and of procedures and functions in Python.